All right, Crim 11. Let's knock out Chapter 7 here, which is gender and delinquency. As most of you can probably guess, I'm not trying to be gender biased, but the vast majority of criminal behavior is committed by males. We're talking somewhere around 70, 80, 90%, depending on which studies you're looking at. So the vast majority of criminal behavior is committed by males. But when you're considering why a person does commit crime, the reason for males and females acting out with delinquency or criminal behavior, the reasons behind it tend to differ. So we're going to kind of talk about that in this chapter. Let's see. Feminist criminology, a corrective model intended to redirect the thinking of mainstream criminologists to include gender awareness. So think about, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to tour the Fresno County Jail, but if you go on a tour of the Fresno County Jail, there's a bunch of different buildings. You've got the North Annex, the South Annex, you've got the main jail. You'll note that there's only one small section for females. And if you walk through the female section of the Fresno County Jail, you will notice it's like going back to the 1960s. The women are behind bars. They are, I don't believe the air conditioning, either it doesn't work in there or they don't have it because there are always oscillating fans on them there. And the facility is very run down, very run down. It looks completely different than the other portions of the jail, which are newer portions, which are where all the men go. Also think about women in custody, and this was something that happened a lot in the juvenile world here in Fresno. We didn't have a lot of programs for girls. We had that Elkhorn Correctional Facility boot camp program out in Carruthers, and that only housed boys. So if we had a girl that had those same types of issues, it was too bad, so sad. We don't have a program for girls, and why would we not spend as much money on programs for girls? Well, because there aren't as many girls in the criminal justice system, or even adult women. So there has been a discrepancy in the services that are available for women and girls in the criminal justice system. Why are females drastically less likely than males to be involved in crime? There's probably a bunch of reasons. But trajectories propel females and males into offending, and again, we're going to talk a lot about that in this chapter. But just think about your own upbringing. You've probably heard the phrase, boys will be boys. And that is kind of a phrase that has been pretty common throughout the United States for decades. And ultimately, a lot of people expect boys to do stupid things. If a girl does something like that, her label is not, oh, haha, it's a girls will be girls. People are wondering what's really going on. Why did this girl commit a criminal act versus a boy committing a criminal act? And we see them differently. What are the ways in which street life, sex and drug markets, criminal opportunities, informal economics, and crime groups are structured by gender other than social features? So what observation occurs in the sequencing and context of women and men's law breaking? Again, think about what types of crime are men typically committing? What types of crime do women commit? Do they commit some of the same? Sure. Are they? Do men commit more violent crime than women? 100%, absolutely, yes, they do. Why is that? How does gender affect the daily lives of females and males? So I love to have a real class, have us all sitting together in a real classroom right now, so that I can pick out one female in the class and one male in the class and ask each one of them, how long did it take you to get ready this morning? And the female is typically, not always, but typically going to say something like, it took me an hour. The male is going to say, it took me 5 minutes. So does that impact our lives on a daily basis? Absolutely. As children, do we, parents, treat our boys and girls the same? I would love to say yes, we do. We treat them exactly the same. And actually, my husband is sitting right here next to me, and let me ask you, when raising our children, did we raise our son and daughter exactly the same?
No.
And why? You're allowed. Tell me why.
I don't know.
Should we raise them the same?
No.
Why?
Because they're different people.
Okay. Well,
they have different personality traits, different strengths and weaknesses, and they need to be handled differently and shown how to deal with things in different ways. That's the best I can say.
Okay, well, what is it? A gender thing, though? I totally put him on the spot.
I'm checking out. You're on your own.
Yeah. No, is it a gender thing? Yeah. I mean, I would love to say, yeah, I treat my son exactly the same as I treat my daughter. Is it, do I? Would you? Think about that. And I'm not asking my husband this question now. I'm asking you guys now. I'll let him off the hook because he's going to get mad pretty soon. No, he's not going to get mad. He just doesn't want to get put on the spot. So anyways, would you treat your boys and girls the same? What's the difference? Think sports. Let's just think about sports. If a boy is at a wrestling match and he is, let's say, a freshman in high school, maybe a sophomore, junior in high school, and he loses that match and he starts to cry, what response are the parents? Probably both parents, but what kind of response are you going to get from the parents? Are they going to be mad that he's crying? Quite possibly. Are they going to be like, don't cry out here, this is not appropriate, you can't be crying in front of everybody? And maybe you wouldn't have experienced that, but just think about that. Then think about what happened if a girls' soccer team were freshmen in high school, sophomores, juniors, whatever, and they lost a big game, and all the girls start crying. Is it a big deal? Right? So do we treat them the same? No, we don't. Do we raise our children the same? No, we don't. Should we? I don't know. That's kind of up for discussion and for you to decide if and when you have children. To make that decision. But so can you imagine how the daily lives of females are different than the daily lives of male? I should call my daughter in here. She'd love to answer this stuff. How do gender roles affect their delinquency? If you are there different types of behaviors, just behaviors in general, that would be considered more masculine or more feminine? And I'm talking like even sitting down in a chair. If a boy sits down in a chair, typically he's got his knees spread wide open and he's taking up as much space as he possibly can. A girl sits down in a chair, she's probably going to sit there and cross her legs. Masculine and feminine behaviors. Now, does that mean that I think this should happen? No, I'm just telling you that this is what it is like in our society. So there are some characteristics that are common to female delinquents. 13 to 18 years old, experienced academic failure, truancy, and dropping out, history of repeated victimization, including physical and sexual and emotional abuse, unstable family background, unhealthy dependent relationships, especially with older males, mental health issues, substance abuse, and she is more likely to be a member of a community of color. So these are typical. That does not mean that if someone falls into all these little bullet points right here, that does not mean she's going to be an offender. But a lot of times with a female, the whole cycle starts with victimization in the home. Whether it's by a parent, a step-parent, other relatives, brothers, uncles, whoever. They're victimized often at home. They'll turn to substance abuse as a way to escape. They might start acting out as a result of the substance abuse and the victimization, and then turn to delinquency or criminality. So there are a couple of different, you could also consider, of course, hormones, another reason why a female might fall into delinquency. And there's a bunch of different theories. We talked about most of these theories in general already as they relate to boys. So they're very similar as with girls, except for, I always like to point out this one here, the masculinity hypothesis. And studies have shown that the more masculine traits a girl has, the more likely she is to become delinquent. I don't know why. That's just what studies have shown. So, feminist theories, they basically say that abuse at the hands of family members and victimization at home is overlooked. And think about it now. Let's imagine a young lady is 15 years old and she's being raped by her father at home. She runs away and is picked up by the police. She's scared to tell the police what's going on because she knows that the whole family falls apart if dad ends up going to prison for raping her. So, police take her right back home. And what, is dad pissed off even more so then? So you can imagine that cycle will continue. A lot of times I had a case with a young man who was on my caseload, just a really nice kid, but his stepdad, who is now married to his mother, his stepdad had molested him. His mother knew it, and she told him not to say anything because they couldn't financially afford the stepdad being removed from the home. So mom ultimately chose stepdad and finances over her son's well-being, which was heartbreaking, and the kid knew it, and it was really sad. He would tell me about it, and as soon as I would call the police or CPS to come in and interview him, he would stop talking. So it was heartbreaking. Yes, they're frequently victims of sexual abuse, fathers, paternal figure, grandparents, things like that. As they run away from home, they learn to survive on the streets. And how does a young lady survive on the streets? You can guess that young ladies are unfortunately almost, at least in their minds, forced into selling themselves in sex acts in order to get money or a place to stay. All right, so this is, very, very commonly how young girls end up being delinquents. There's alleged to be gender bias, and really, honestly, a lot of what this is explaining that the services are not there for women and girls. We don't spend money on programs, again, like I said earlier, for girls because there just aren't that many of them, and we're trying to spend all our money on these violent male offenders, so the girls kind of get pushed aside and they don't receive the services that they need. Because racism and poverty often go hand in hand, girls are often forced by their minority status and poverty to deal early and regularly with drugs, abuse, and violence. I think I'm going to kind of skip through, and we're done. We made it through chapter 7.